I wasn't super tight with my dad. He was a tough nut. One thing he taught me, though, is he said, you got to do two things, Robbie. You got to be your own man. And I'm punching that clock, I'm punching that ticket on the daily. And 2 years in marketing solutions, my clients are still with me. He told me another thing, as I fix this thing, he told me another thing. He said, you got to do work. My dad was a World War II vet, spent 50 years working in a factory in Waterbury, Connecticut, and grew up during the Depression. He told me, Robbie, you got to do work. My first year at LinkedIn 6 years ago, my dad died of pancreatic cancer. And I'll never forget going into the basement of my mom and dad's house in Danielson, Connecticut. And there were these sticky notes everywhere. These little yellow sticky notes on the damn water heater, so my mom would know how to turn the water heater on. It was on the bag of pictures that he had organized. There was a sticky note on the bandsaw and the table saw, just in case my now 83-year-old mother was going to get up and start using the saw. I realized I've got to start creating a legacy for my kids. And because I've worked with students literally since the day I started at LinkedIn, right? I've made it my business to talk to a lot of students. I said to these guys, and everyone that works with me knows I talk about my kids all the time. JD just started his sophomore year at Chapel Thrill, University of North Carolina. Heck yeah, go Heels, right? My other son, by the grace of God, got into UConn, made the swim team, and he's a freshman. I was up there dropping him off in August, and I got to that point where it was really awkward. Anyone do this, drop a kid off of college yet? Yeah, it got real awkward, right? His roommate's sitting there. I'm like, okay, I guess I got to go. Tears are starting to well up. He comes up to me and gives me a big hug. He says, Dad, I love you. Do work. Now get the hell out of here. So I truck it down to visit my brother in Providence. So what I want to talk to you about is the fact that I started hashtagging, do work on every single thing I did, LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever. And all the super smart social media people said, well, that's really lame. LinkedIn doesn't really even support hashtags. We do now. But we don't even support it. Take out your app. No, you're all on a LinkedIn app right now. Put do work, Rob Humphrey. You'll see a whole lineage, a whole history of my work story. All the places I've been. The James Hunt Library, where I spend many hours doing my job. My kid's dorm room, which I got pounced out of, and that type of thing. I've created, over time, instructions, little sticky notes to leave a legacy for my children, for all the students I've ever talked to, and anybody that's interested in my philosophy. And that's all on LinkedIn specifically. Why? Because I'm super ADD and I can't take Twitter anymore. I couldn't figure it out. Snapchat, not allowed. I can't even talk about it. My 13-year-old daughter. But it's all on LinkedIn, the only network where parents and kids can coexist. And it's all there. And if this talk goes well, all of y'all are going to be able to leave a legacy of your own and at the same time promote your own personal brand, your faculty's brand, your student's brand, and your school or institution's brand. Does that sound interesting to y'all? All right. So my philosophy when I talk in general, to students mainly, is to dream big, to have fun. But now that my kids are in college, it's less about that, right? And of course, to do work. So let's actually do some work, okay? Bear with me here. I'm also going to assign some homework. And I don't want you all to worry at all about it. You're not going to do it anyway. You're going to have a bunch of excuses. But if we're successful, we're going to do this. First of all, let me tell you about my perspective on students, because I thought, well, I've been higher ed vertical for so long, I'm an expert on this topic. Turns out I'm not. My sons are 18 and 19. They represent 14% of the people that live on a campus, and a very small percentage, relatively speaking, of the students that actually go to a university, right? So who are students? There are 20 million, roughly, of them that are doing all kinds of things. Turns out 3.5 million of them are getting their degrees online, right? And they're also not 18 or 19. Turns out their average ages are much different than that, right? They're more 24, 26, 30. They're actually more like Russ Kettle, who was in a band, like a lot of talented musicians. Any musicians in the house? There's actually a few. I know that for a fact. So Russ Kettle had a disagreement with his band mates. Big surprise, right? But what he did was interesting. He actually started SNHU's, Southern New Hampshire University's program, in partnership with Berkeley, which is a great music school, online. So he's in a band, following his dream, trying to get done, and at the same time taking this MBA in music and business. Students are more like Jason Miller, who actually works at LinkedIn. He's one of our experts in social media and content marketing. You may have seen a Sophisticated Marketer's Guide. You may have seen some of the epic content that he's created. He's also a rock and roll photographer, and a great one at that. He would attribute, based on the call I had with him this week, he would attribute his role today at LinkedIn to taking a UC Berkeley extension course on digital marketing, a course that he actually now teaches online. So students are much different than what I had thought. And I think it's important to frame up this before we get to our homework. So what are they doing on LinkedIn? I get this question all the time. LinkedIn's a job board, right? Well, that's interesting because we have 8 million content impressions every week, and it's about 15 times more than people looking at jobs. So that's not what's going on LinkedIn, and students are starting to vigorously understand that. And there's a couple pieces of the equation here that make it super epic. So what are they doing? Well, they're not doing anything that's uncommon that we all do, right? Anybody use Netflix? God, I hope so. What about music, by the way? I'm kind of curious by show of hands. Anybody subscribing to Spotify? Okay, who's using Apple Music? Okay, SoundCloud? I'm in that category, by the way. I got joined it the other day, and my son made me. It's very cool. I'm on the cutting edge. Well, students are doing the same thing on LinkedIn now. They're not just searching for jobs. They're actually spending an inordinate amount of time subscribing. Subscribing to channels, for example, from our Pulse Discovery scenario, right? Maya Pope Chappelle will be happy to know that my favorite channel is Student Voices, where the grittiest and the most motivated students are writing content on LinkedIn right now. They're also looking at channels like social media and careers getting ahead. So they're following channels, essentially, just like on Netflix or whatever. They're also following people, and not just influencers, sort of these anointed gods of content, the Richard Bransons of the world, which is great, aspirational content. They're hungry for little tiny sticky notes, little tiny instructables that come from faculty, alumni, and folks like you. That's what they're looking for, and that's what they're subscribing to. In fact, they're actually following more and more of their peers. The other thing they're doing is getting more focused on what I call conditioning their feed, just focusing on the things that matter. And this is the direction that LinkedIn is heading. Listen, here's the homework, right? First, follow 3 channels if you're not. Just pick 3 channels, follow them, go to Pulse Discover, and do that. If you're a super, sort of motivated student, maybe you're like Molly, who graduated from Denison, works at 2U as a varsity lacrosse player, go ahead and follow for this extra credit 3 students, right? My picks happen to be all undergraduates, Two of the top happen to have gone to Carolina, just by happenstance. Kayla Wilkinson and Sharice Roberts, who's currently a campus editor at UNC Carolina. That's your extra credit. The other thing they're doing, as I'd mentioned, is they're publishing. And this is a fascinating thing to watch. There's over 1,200 published posts from just our campus editors, of which there's roughly 25 or 26 campus editors out there, and that program is growing very, very rapidly. They're publishing. And they're not just publishing updates, they're publishing a number of long-form posts or blog posts. So it didn't take anything but a trip in the Jeep up to Chapel Thrill to actually meet with Sharice before I met with my son for lunch and talk to her about this. She is publishing for a variety of reasons, but the interesting part of the story is 2 years back, I went to a fellow by the name of Gary Kay, who's an adjunct professor at Carolina's journalism school. I did a talk on why students should publish. And some of them listened. Sharice did. In fact, Sharice started publishing early on and got picked up to be part of our editor program. So they're doing a lot of publishing. Students are the new influencers. If you look at someone like Sharice as an example, you'll notice that her following dwarfs pretty much the following everybody in this room combined, plus a couple other people, right? So it's a fascinating inflection point that we're looking at. So here's the homework. Here's the big piece of homework that no one's going to do. You want to do it, but you really want your faculty to do it, but they're not going to do it. Let me ask this question. And I know the answer because I've looked at every single profile of everyone that RSVP'd for this event, and I already know the answer. How many journalism majors are in the room? Exactly. How many people have a English degree? And I know Sandra has an English degree from Ithaca College, and it's her third time here, Sandra from Cornell, so I know that she's here as well. How many people are marketers? I know that answer, right? So by way of being a marketer, you're already a publisher. So your assignment is to publish on LinkedIn, right? And to make it even more enticing and easy, the first person that agrees to publish an article on LinkedIn is going to get this box of Levain cookies. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Some fancy cookie place up on the Upper West Side. Danielle Roz, my teammate, had went up there, and that shit's expensive. First person to raise their hand and agree to do that is going to get those cookies. Everyone else, you're just going to get the respect of your faculty, your peers, your marketing counterparts, and your school that you went to and learned all this great writing capability. We have a winner right here. What's your name?
Julie.
Julie, these are for you.
It's really about the cookies. I told my kids that I bring back cookies to the Thank you.
Julie, I'm going to be looking for your post, and I have a few ideas. I have a few headlines that you could roll with. Rob Humphrey hands out cookies in desperate attempt to make his talk popular. Or CMO panel, Al Jazeera, effing delicious blog posts, and Harvard. I've got a few more in my head percolating around, so just see me after if you need a headline to get started. It's really easy to do. Has anyone been to the publishing platform lately? I have. It's completely revamped. I'm so stoked about it. Like I am a criminal of not writing, and I'm going to commit to be writing starting today. And I'm going to write about this exact experience, my third Education Connect experience. So it's really easy. You press the button and you start writing. Whatever comes to your mind, you just start writing it. That's it. Step 3, you add some visuals, because who does not like eye candy? And this is a great opportunity to not have the prototypical image for your marketing content with the lovely middle-aged white man with the blue tie, the Hispanic lady, and the black guy holding a book. This is an opportunity for you to actually do something really interesting. For me, I get my inspiration from a number of different places, but here's some extra credit. Anybody do photography? Almost everybody, right? I consider myself an iPhone journalist as well. I know that some people here, like Krista Watson, right, actually take phenomenal photos and have been to cool places, like Italy and Iceland, as an example. And you can actually plug in super wide images. So you could take your DSLR high-res image, plug it into our platform, and it will go super wide. You also can add video. One of my posts, of course, working on my headline is the view from my hotel room at Las Vegas from last year when I happened to be there for a conference. And what I did is I actually didn't just put a YouTube post in there. I used Wistia, which is one of these services, and I created my own little embedded flow, and I actually looked at the metrics of everybody that watched and rewatched, and the sections they rewatched multiple times of my time lapse with my GoPro. So, extra credit is super wide images and video. Need inspiration? 100 Gates is complete. Now, I live in Raleigh, but I love coming to New York, and I love street art. 100 Gates is an effort here where artists basically went and took 100 security gates and like infamous artists and painted them. And this is the one that's the 100th at the Cat's Deli. So you can go and check that out. I don't think it's that far away. You can also write about things you observe. I love the overheads from campuses, for example. I went to school in Ithaca, New York, not at Cornell, the other school, but the overheads of that particular campus, anything at Carolina, I mean, there's just so many cool images to be had, right? I go to diners all the time. My favorite in Tempe, outside of, at the ASU campus, is the Normal Diner, if you've been there. And of course, just general art. So the third thing students are doing is they're on mobile. They're not as much on the desktop. I'll leave it to Ira and all the research insights experts to tell you all the details of who's on doing what. But for mobile, it's the most fascinating piece of the equation. If you come away with anything, it's the fact that your sticky note, your post, your legacy and inspiration for an entire generation are now searchable, right? So students are following schools on mobile, number one. Two, they're starting to search content, meaning they can go in and say, what can I do with art history degree and MBA? Or careers for art history, that type of thing. And that's exactly what's happening on LinkedIn right now. Content searching and searching for posts on mobile is the biggest and most exciting thing I've seen at LinkedIn in almost 7 years of being an employee. And the other thing is people like to bookmark stuff. Just like when Narcos comes out, you make sure you bookmark that, right? And you go through that. Everyone been through that second season? Yeah, we'll talk about it over a drink up on the roof deck. That's happening. And then lastly, topics. So students are looking for specific topics, and that's something that's a huge opportunity. So I would never assign this homework for you to go and just simply start writing, especially you with immense writing skills, without the ability for a bunch of people to see it. So all these millions of content impressions, and it's a lot of the same stuff. It's up to every one of us in the room to start the engine. And then all the faculty and administrators, and finally the career services people and alumni and development people will come along with us and say, wow, these guys are pioneers, right? They're absolute pioneers, right? That's it. Lastly, the student app. Your homework assignment is to download the new LinkedIn student app. It's completely different. I've done hundreds of talks over the years to some 25,000 students about using LinkedIn. And I go through the alumni tool. I go through all the elements of creating a profile, and I try to make it as unawkward as possible for them because they're scared, right? Even the adult learners, they're scared because they don't have a lot of really legitimate work experience. It's intimidating. Well, we've solved for that problem, and here's how it works. You plug in your school. Let's just say you went to Carolina and you're in the Keenan Flagler School of Business. Let's just throw that out there, right? And when you're going to graduate. That's it. Now we present to students cards, essentially cards. The first card is recommendations for reading, okay? So if you all have written your post on how to get a career in marketing or how to take an art history degree and not end up at dinner and punching your grandmother in the face because she asked you if you had a job yet, right? That's what they're looking for. Second are people cards, right? So instead of scrolling through the carousel of the alumni tool, which is a great thing to do visually, you actually have this being brought to the attention of the student using the app, and now they can say, wow, I didn't know there was all these people from my school doing this job or at this company. And lastly is company cards where it clearly tells you these are the alumni that work at this company. Oddly enough, I have Microsoft in my experience. Interesting. So the other piece of the equation here is why it works, of course. And that is, one, alumni connections are the best path to a job. If you saw my talk last year, basically what I said is the job search hasn't changed in forever, and it hasn't, right? If you're, Chip from the, going to your liberal arts college in 1979, you come home and you're meeting up with your parents at the country club, and they say, Chip, don't worry, go find yourself whatever, go travel Europe, head over to China, whatever you want to do. I got a job for you at Acme Consulting or finance firm, and you could just take the train from New York, from Stanford down there every day. But go enjoy yourself. If you have that, that's wonderful. But who has that? Nobody. What most people have is alumni connectivity. And I've seen tons of people get jobs. In fact, I was at ASU last year, and there was a woman named Shalipa who's a master's in engineering there. And she was in the front row, very attentive, taking notes, and she said to me, what's the best way to get a job? I ran through this exact scenario around alumni connectivity. She emailed me 4 weeks ago and said, Rob, I got a job based on your talk. Not based on my talk, because she actually connected with an alumni from that exact school that happened to work at DHL, and that's where she is an intern, and she got a job offer just recently. That's exactly how it works. And by way of doing your homework, we're all going to solve for this problem. So it works also because 93% of recruiters, according to our data, my own personal data isn't 100%, use LinkedIn for recruiting. So that's the other reason that the app works. So your third piece of homework is download the student app. One thing to keep in mind when you do that, when you put in the school, if you put in a new school, it's going to add that to your profile. The reason I mention that is you need to be aware of that if it's not already on your profile. The great part about that is when students first interact with the student app, that's the first thing they're asked. So when my customers are always saying to me, well, what are you guys doing to increase the number of undergraduate students or students in general? The answer is we're now making it really easy for them to do two simple things. Tell us where they went to school and when they're graduating and what they're studying, which is the easiest piece of the puzzle, right? But it has been historically the most complex. Change brings opportunity. I want to thank you for having me. I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you in advance for your posts, your sticky notes, and your inspiration for an entire generation of people. Thank you.